You keep meeting the same kind of people, even when their faces change. Different voices, different stories, same ending. At first, it feels like coincidence. Then it feels like bad luck. Eventually, it feels personal. You ask yourself what you're doing wrong. Why this keeps happening. Why you always end up here. You replay conversations in your head. You search for the moment things turned. You never find it. Because the truth is quieter than that. It doesn't arrive as a mistake. It arrives as familiarity. You feel drawn before you think. Comfortable before you trust. Connected before you understand why. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because attraction isn't random. It's patterned. The people you attract don't feel new. They feel recognizable. Like something your body already knows. Not safe. Not healthy. Just familiar. You mistake that familiarity for chemistry. For depth. For fate. But here's what no one tells you. Your nervous system remembers more than your mind. And it chooses faster than you can think. You don't choose people logically. You recognize them emotionally. You feel them before you evaluate them. This is where most people misunderstand themselves. They blame taste. They blame standards. But taste is learned. Standards are shaped. And both come from somewhere. Long before you knew the words for it. Long before you had choices. Your system learned what connection feels like. It learned what to expect. What to tolerate. What love costs. And this is the part no one warns you about. What saved you once is hurting you now. The pattern didn't disappear, it matured. You learned how to stay, how to adapt, how to make yourself smaller when needed, not because you were weak, but because leaving wasn't an option. This wasn't your personality, it was survival. And your system never forgot that lesson. It still scans for the same signals. Still pulls you toward the same emotional weather. You don't attract the wrong people by accident. You attract what your nervous system recognizes as manageable, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar enough to survive. Here's the painful part. Your body confuses intensity with connection, and tension with meaning. Calm feels boring. Consistency feels suspicious. Stability feels empty, because chaos once meant closeness. Uncertainty meant attention. Emotional distance meant danger, so your system learned to lean forward, to chase, to overread signals. You didn't choose this. Your nervous system did. It was trained in an environment where hypervigilance kept you connected. And this explains why it never changed. Why awareness alone didn't fix it. Why insight wasn't enough. Because this pattern lives below thought, below logic, below intention. It lives in reaction time, in muscle tension, in what feels right before it feels wrong. You call it attraction, but it's actually recognition. Your body recognizing an old emotional climate. This is why you ignore red flags early. Not because you don't see them, but because they feel normal. Normal doesn't mean healthy. It just means repeated. Practiced, you learned how to function inside emotional imbalance. How to stay regulated while others stayed unpredictable. And you mistook that skill for strength, but it was adaptation. It was survival intelligence. This is why you feel most alive when something is unresolved. When there's something to earn, something to fix. Because resolution once meant loss, distance, silence. So your system learned to stay inside the question, inside the tension, inside the waiting. You call it patience, but it's actually conditioning, a learned response to uncertainty. And once you see this, something shifts. Not relief, just clarity. You stop asking what's wrong with you, and start noticing what feels familiar inside you. The pattern becomes visible, not as blame, but as a map. And this is where most people turn away. Because seeing the map means seeing where it began. not with the wrong people, but with the first people who taught you connection. You learned early what earned attention, what kept others close, what made you necessary, and you built your identity around that, quietly, without consent. This wasn't a conscious decision. You didn't sit down and choose it. You adapted in real time. You became attentive, flexible, emotionally available beyond your limits. And it worked. It kept connection alive, so your system kept using it. Here's the part that hurts to admit. You don't just attract the wrong people. You feel most valuable around them because they activate your role. The one where you know who you are. The fixer, the listener, the one who stays. Healthy people don't need that version of you. And that can feel like rejection, not because you're unwanted, but because you're not required to disappear. This is why safe connections feel distant at first. There's no role to perform, no tension to manage, and without that, your system feels lost, unneeded, undefined. So it pulls you back to what makes sense, even if it hurts. This is the loop, not self-sabotage, but self-recognition. You're not drawn to pain. You're drawn to coherence, to a story your body already understands. And this explains why you stay too long, why you explain too much, why you wait for change that never comes. Because leaving feels like failure, like abandoning something unfinished. But what if it's not unfinished? What if the lesson already happened? What if the pattern isn't asking you to stay, but to notice? Notice how your body tightens, how your attention sharpens, how you disappear into usefulness. This is the moment of choice most people miss. Not choosing them, choosing yourself. Not through action, but through awareness. You see the pull without following it, the urge without obeying it, and that's uncomfortable, because you're breaking a contract you never signed. Your nervous system protests. It wants the old certainty, but you stay inside yourself. This is not healing as relief. It's healing as silence. No rush, no story, no urgency to be chosen. And slowly, something recalibrates. What feels familiar begins to change. You don't stop attracting people. You stop confusing activation with connection. Calm no longer feels empty. It feels spacious. Consistency stops feeling dull. It feels grounding, and the wrong people lose their gravity. Not because they changed, but because you did. This wasn't about attraction. It was about alignment. You weren't broken. You were patterned. And now you see it. Clearly, quietly. If this felt uncomfortably accurate, you're not alone here. This channel exists for people who notice patterns before they break them. Stay not to change yourself, but to keep seeing clearly.